Our next guest, Jessica DeVita, I've seen her speak before. You're in for a really good time. I would highly encourage you guys to move over to the Q&A section as well to get your questions ready. But with that being said, I'm just going to hand it over to Jessica and let her take it away.
Well, hi, thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate that introduction. Let's see. Well, am I sharing my screen? Let's see. Let me know if you can. Okay, there we go. Well, so hello there. I'm so excited about this conference and just so appreciate Patrick and Jeff and all of the wonderful folks working together to make this conference happen. I wanted to ask if all of you, if you feel so moved, if you are able to donate to this wonderful cause. All of the funds are going to help various charities to focus on helping the COVID-19 victims. And I know that this number is probably very out of date, but I know that we've already raised, at the time I took this note, almost $70,000, but there's a number of folks that are matching your donations. So I would just ask if you are able and if you feel so moved to please go ahead and donate. There's a link on the screen. I hope that this talk will spark some interesting conversations for you going forward. The talk is never about me, it's never about the speaker, it's about you and what happens for you after and what happens for you tomorrow. So that's my goal for today, is that this would spark some very interesting conversations for you. The bottom line up front is that people I care about are suffering from the lie that the 5 whys are appropriate for complex systems failures and analysis of these types of failures. And I'm hoping to debunk some of those myths and help you think about some better ways to move forward. So I generally like to avoid blame, but in this case, I do think that Eric Ries bears a lot of the burden of sort of promoting and propagating the 5 whys, and it's super frustrating. So Eric, this talk is for you. This article on Medium is just one example of the countless articles that are peddling this approach to finding the root cause of a problem. And this article proposes that there's just some very simple steps. And they say, ask why the problem happens and write down the answer to the problem. And if the answer you just provided doesn't identify the root cause that you wrote down in step 1, well, maybe you should ask why again and write that answer down. They helpfully warn that in the beginning, you usually won't find the root cause of the problem. So they encourage you to loop back to step 3 until the team agrees that the root cause of the problem has been identified. Now, if you listen to advice from random people on the internet, you're going to have a bad time. So let's take a step back away from these simplified methods and explore what's really going on here. But wait a second, there's a template in Excel. Surely it's got to have some legitimacy for us. Look, it's right under the improvement tools drop down. And it looks like you can have the 3-legged 5 whys. What is that? I got to find out. But the basis of the 5 whys comes from the Toyota production system. And again, this simplified method, this talks about by repeating these questions, the question why, just 5 times, not 7, not 12, but 5. The nature of the problem and its solution is just going to become clearer. Thus, 5, the solution is 1H. And so 5 whys equals 1 how. Well, isn't that convenient? So convenient, right? I think that starts to get to the problem, is that this is a very seductive lie we've been sold. And human factors and system safety and safety scientists have resoundingly rejected this approach. But it is so seductive. Leadership is so looking for something simple. They want an answer that will somehow soothe this, issues that we feel inside when there has been an incident or an outage. But this seductive trap is just that, a trap, and it's not going to lead to a happy place. So let's talk about the traps and what problems you're going to run into. And I think the first most important one is that these can lead to attribution of to human error, and human error is just another lie that we've been told about complex systems failures. It is a lie. And we can look to Dr. David Woods and Richard Cook. They have a great paper called Perspectives on Human Error, Hindsight Biases and Local Rationality, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. 5 Whys and RCA don't require psychological safety. This is a quote from IVP 008 on Twitter. You can deploy them at any time and anywhere without any preparation on any vulnerable soul. You can do it with people who trust you or who don't. It's more of an exploit than it is anything to do with learning. And that, I thought, was so perfectly describes the problem. You see the 5 Whys, Richard Tibbetts on Twitter says, it's all about asking why until you get an answer that you like. And it's ideally one that shifts the blame to someone who cannot defend themselves and or is very cheap to remediate. Trap number 2, counterfactual reasoning. Now, you may have heard that term or not, but I guarantee you that you know when it is at play. Whenever you hear, and you will hear this if you are participating in any type of 5 Whys exercise, is you will hear the words should have, could have, would have, failed to, did not. That's counterfactual reasoning, and you're describing an incident that didn't happen as some sort of way of explaining what did happen. It's crazy. Trap number 3 is the use of normative language. Normative language is, you might hear people describing, well, they did something carelessly or hastily or inadequately. And the problem with normative language is that it's you're judging outcomes based on the one piece of information that was unavailable to the humans involved at the time they made their decisions. And to be clear, like, normative language can also be used in the opposite sense. People might praise operators for having acted appropriately, for example. But this judgment, again, is made with the benefit of hindsight, and it's made with the benefit of information that the people in the question did not have. Mark Johnson says that the 5 Whys and the problem with root cause analysis is that whose 5 Whys will take precedent? We know that in a blame culture, hierarchy type of environment, probably whoever's got the power is going to, their 5 Whys will take precedent. That is not learning. My favorite trap that you'll fall into with the 5 Whys is mechanistic reasoning. This mechanistic reasoning says that our system would have been just fine if it hadn't been for those meddling kids. This is built on this idea that we work in systems that are basically great. They're working just fine. And that failure can be explained by a component with this system that wasn't functioning as expected. And if only those meddling kids hadn't gone and deployed that broken configuration, everything would have been just fine. Now, the problem here that I probably don't need to tell you, but that this is simply not how our systems work. It's just not it. this leads us down a path where we think that finding the faulty human, we're back to the human error issue, is equivalent to finding the problem. But that same faulty human has been improvising and adapting to keep the system running for weeks and months. And Sue Allspot spoke to this in her earlier talk. Hopefully you'll get a chance to watch that when the recordings come out. She talks about working to rule, where you're following the steps precisely, but we know that that is not safe. We know that humans adapting to keep the systems running is what saves our bacon every time. So I think there's probably more to look at here. Alan Card has a wonderful article called "The Problem with the Five Whys," and he pulls no punches and says, the real problem with the five whys is that it so grossly oversimplifies the process of problem exploration. It should not be used at all. Dr. Bob Weers, who is no longer with us, and Dr. Christopher Nemeth have a terrific article called Replacing Hindsight with Insight, and I encourage you to check out the link. It's a very, very good paper, and it's very easy to read. They talk about this delusional clarity, and that hindsight is powerful to help us organize and put structure and impose this kind of structure on past events. They talk about converting confusing and complex histories into neat, linear, more certain, and less ambiguous narratives that provide a sort of delusional clarity. Terrific article. Please take a look at it. And again, the problem is that these techniques do not apply to the systems you work in. Maybe this applies if you're trying to figure out why your new sourdough recipe for bread didn't work out. But you're not making bread here. We're making systems that humans rely on and need to rely on. And they're messy. Make no mistake about it. John Allspot talks about these systemic factors that, your five whys is never going to give you these answers. But if you really dig in, you're going to discover a whole messy system that is it just can't be covered by these five whys. I would be remiss if I did not make sure that you know about Dr. Richard Cook, who has a fabulous paper called How Complex Systems Fail. And I think it's required reading for anyone working in DevOps or any type of web operations tooling. Leadership should read this. When we get back to normal, whatever that is, the next talk I give, I'm waiting for the talk that I can go and put this under everybody's chairs and you can discover it, because I think it's that important. But he describes a number of nuances about how complex systems fail, and I just really encourage you to take a look at that. But let's go for more science. We have Dr. Nancy Levison, and she is from MIT. She has a terrific paper, also very easy to digest and read, and it's applying systems thinking to analyze and learn from events. Now, I'm just going to pull a couple of points out of her paper. She says, again, pulling no punches, that five whys is perhaps the most simplistic, and it leads to the least amount of learning from events. She describes a big issue is that the results are not reproducible. You can go into one room and do five whys, and your colleague can go into another, and you will never come up with the same answers, because again, the results are not reproducible. It's really problematic, and people will come up with these different solutions for the same problem. And finally, this is, again, the article is really worth reading in its entirety, but a single root cause is assumed along with one neat linear path to the event. And we have heard time and time again from J. Paul Reed, from John Allspaw, from numerous practitioners in the field that this is just it's wrong. It's not going to help you in any way. That's just not how events unfold. It is this act of separating important or contributory events from unimportant ones by a few key decision makers. And it is then, to quote Sidney Dekker, an act of construction. It is the creation of a story. We do not find cause, we construct it. It is not the reconstruction of a story that is just sitting there waiting for you to uncover it. You're making it up. It is not objective. It is completely subjective to what you choose to include and not include. From John's mouth to your ears, why is the wrong question? He has a terrific article, which I think Matt spoke to earlier, The Infinite Hows. And he talks about how asking how actually will help you get people to describe at least some of the conditions that allowed an event to take place, and will give you a lot more rich operational data about how things really work and how things really break. So definitely take a look at this article. I think it just very detailed explanations about the problems with the questions why. My answer is that 5 whys only have the same 5 answers, and it's because local rationality. So I replied to my colleague, Nick Stent, my former colleague from Microsoft, Nick Stenning, wonderful human. Thank you, Nick, for all you do and all you are. Appreciate you. It is this local rationality that I think is at the heart of what I'm trying to share with you. People are doing the best that they can with the things that they know and can see at the time. And remember, a few minutes ago, I talked about hindsight bias and the problems with it. So Dr. Richard Cook has drawn this, this illustration that is in Sidney Dekker's book, The Field Guide to Human Error. And they describe that in the moments, we need to look at what the world looked like to people at the time. Remember, you have hindsight. They don't have that yet, right? They don't know what you now know. So you have to only look at what they saw as best as you can, is to try to understand what the world looked like at the time. Otherwise, you're just falling into these traps that I've warned you about. So listen, I could talk all day about, how wrong this is and how damaging this is, but let's be real. If you have an addiction to the 5 whys or any addiction, we need to offer some replacement behaviors. And this is where I think we can really help our colleagues is, when you see these types of things going on, it's not that helpful to say, you're doing it wrong. Instead, you want to look at how does it make sense for them? You have to see the seductive lies that they have been told to even hope to shift or change that behavior. So I want to offer some replacement behaviors that you might think about and lean into if you get a chance. The best thing that we have in our toolkit today is to run facilitated post-incident reviews. John Allspaw spoke about this morning when he described that this should be a neutral facilitator. You should not be the person who was running the incident, but that having these facilitated discussions can really help you unearth and learn so much more. A single engineer writing a postmortem probably isn't going to learn that much, and organizational learning will suffer as a result. To John's point, we need to ask better questions at how instead of why. Just shift that one thing. Ask how things went right as well. There's things go wrong for many of the same reasons that they go right. This all flows from the same mental processes. So we need to look at like what went right for people, because things could have always been worse, I promise you. Now, I just used a counterfactual, could have. Hope you caught that. Finally, I want you to think about keeping your review and planning meetings separate. So John also spoke about this as well. When you shift into discussions about action items, you're done with the learning part, you've moved on. How could those repairs stand the test of time? You need to keep those separate. I would suggest holding that meeting a day or two later, and hold it with people who can actually move the backlog around. Stop playing backlog bingo when you don't have the right people in the room to make those decisions. So again, those are some replacement behaviors that I think might be useful for you to try to just noodle on and think about how you might try those things out if you think it's worth doing. But I want to give you a couple of things to sort of begin to wrap our time together. You probably know, because I won't shut up about it, but I'm in the Masters in Human Factors and System Safety at Lund University. And one of the students in my program, who's a pilot, tweeted, or he shared this, and I just wanted you to know that great things can happen when you try other things. So this other toolkit you should know about is the AXA map. So he said his authority, referring to the leadership in the airlines, they just accepted an AXA map to close a problem, close out a accident that occurred. Screw you, Five Whys. So these are really exciting to me to know that that these other outcomes are possible. And you can try this too. Yeah, this isn't special. You can learn these things. You could try them as well. As I promised, some parting thoughts as we as I close my rant. All credit to John Alspa, but when you hear RCA, henceforth you shall thank respective cover of ass, and silently or not, you can laugh in your these meetings. Maybe that won't have the best outcome, but it is. It's how can we retrospectively cover our ass? This is the defense mechanism that get invoked when you go with the old methods of 5 whys and root cause analysis. What are most root cause analysis, if not a lie that everyone agrees on? Just one of the many lies that I hope to debunk with you. Gonna get punchy here. When you start to question these practices in your workplace, how you do that can be dangerous. It can be a career-limiting move. But I assert that any place that you're working that does not allow you to deeply question previous practices, again, how you approach it matters. If you come in there, waving the big flag of you're doing it wrong, like, you're not going to have a great result. But if you can, explore with a colleague or two, and then 3, and then 5, and start to talk with people about, what they hope to get out of these practices, you might have a better result. But listen, if that is not tolerated, Jan talks about being, she was told to basically be quiet, and then not talk about it. That is not safe. It's not a safe workspace. There's zero psychological safety, to Matt's talk earlier, and you need to get out. Now, that's a very privileged thing to say, but there were days that I really did have to be willing to leave, to stand for what I believe in, which is to try to help people, and to try to help engineers learn more from these incidents. So think deeply about, your safety and that of your colleagues, as you start to question these practices, okay? Our words matter. Our words have consequences. When I talk about shifting from why to how, it matters. There's a reason that I'm proposing that. I've tried to offer some background on why, how it is that these word shifts really matter, but they do matter. They matter a lot. And I hope that some of these things I've talked with you today about will give you some food for thought and to help you perk up your ears when you start to hear those counterfactuals. Think deeply about what, of course, intention matters. And I don't think people mean to be harmful with these things. I think they simply don't know the damage that they might be doing. So try to carry a lot of kindness in your heart for when you're trying to approach making these kinds of shifts in language and changes. I'm very grateful to be a part of a community of researchers and practitioners. Some of their names I've shared on screen here. Please check them out and follow them on Twitter. They always have insightful things to say. Also check out learningfromincidents.io. Nora Jones started this wonderful community, and there's just wonderful things coming out of there. So be sure to join us and read the wonderful articles that people have written from our community. Thank you. I am Jessica DeVita. I'm with Netflix, and I am so grateful for your time and attention today. It means a lot to me, and I am just delighted that you chose to spend this time today. And as I mentioned, please do donate if you'd like to help the cause. Some of your employers might match your donations, so we can really make a big difference for people with your donations. If you do feel so moved to join, I'd so appreciate it. And with that, I would like to take any questions that you might have.
Hey, Jessica, great talk. We do have a few questions here, so we'll just go right into those. From Steve, how does the NTSB process compare to these concerns that you and John have laid out?
NTSB, so there's been a number of mornings where I argue with the NTSB on Twitter because from time to time they do talk about trying to use more of these more modern approaches that are backed by decades of research in human factors. But I continue to see them talk about causes. I do continue to see them use counterfactual language. It's really problematic. So I think we still have work to do. I don't know if the guy or gal who runs the NTSB Twitter account, I don't know them. But I do know that we continue to have work to do. This isn't a thing we're just going to solve tonight and whoop, now we solved that. But, so I guess to try to answer that question is we really do need to continue to, hope that they will get the message and work to use better, less harmful language in their public and hopefully in their investigations.
Okay, great. Next question. Is there still any value in the 5 Whys left?
No. No, again, you're not working in systems that would in any way be appropriate for this method. I want to be clear that there's nothing you're going to learn that you don't already know. The 5 Whys you don't ask anything. It doesn't give you any answers that you don't already know. I don't think there's any value left, which is why I'm trying to give this talk and offer some alternatives. I do think it should absolutely never be used.
I just love the unequivocalness. That's beautiful. Last question, actually, for me. When we talk about neutral facilitators, are we talking about people just avoiding the incident commander, or are we saying anyone that was involved with the incident shouldn't be a facilitator?
So let me try to clarify what I mean there. If you were responding to the incident, if you were the incident commander, if you were one of the people involved with mitigation, if you then serve and try to serve as a facilitator, you will carry a bias into that meeting, and you can't not have a bias. You were deeply involved. You need to ask one of your colleagues if they would serve as a facilitator for you, so that you can respond in the meeting as the role you serve. Like, we need to hear from you about what you experienced, what was hard for you. If you're the facilitator, you cannot do those things, and you can't like neatly take off your facilitator hat and then respond. I just think you really lose so much, and mostly we lose your experience as a person who's deeply involved in the incident.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, we got to leave it there. We do still have some questions, so if you got some time and want to hang out in the
Sure.
DevSecOps channel, a number of good questions there. But thanks again. Great talk. Look forward to watching it again because there's so much to unpack.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I'm so glad, and I really appreciate your help, Jeff, and great to see you again.
You too. Take care.